Good morning, everyone. My name is Doryn Glenn. I'm Chief Deputy District Clerk for John Kennard, the District Clerk of Galveston County. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today about our historical immigration and naturalization records. So you don't really think about historical records being found in a courthouse. You think about them in a school. You think about them in a museum. You really don't think about them at the courthouse. But hopefully, by the time we're done here, you will think about how much history there is, and specifically for this presentation, the history that can be found in immigration and naturalization records from the turn of the century. So the district clerk's office is the custodian of those court records from the late 1800s to like the mid 1950s or something about that nature. You are used to thinking about immigration as being a complete focus and function of the federal government, as you should, because that is exactly as it is now. But as we talk about it, what I think you'll find is that back at the turn of the century, people could file their records in any local court, any court of local jurisdiction. So that's why a district court in a simple county, as opposed to a federal court, is able to have these records, and that's why I'm able to discuss them with you today. Now, I do just want to mention that the Texas Supreme Court recognized the need for the preservation and protection of these records around the state. And so about 13 years ago, they went around to each one of the counties and tried to identify records that were vulnerable and of great historic value. So we are very appreciative to the efforts of the Texas Supreme Court for recognizing the need to restore those and for doing everything they can to make sure that these records are here for more generations to see. So let's talk a little bit, just an overview. So in immigration, the word immigration refers to the action of one person coming permanently from one country to another, right? We're not talking about just going to visit, going to, visit family, even going to work for a while. Immigration is the act of permanently going from one country to another. And then naturalization refers to the legal process by which that individual can become a citizen. And so that's a term that you've heard a lot, and that's exactly what that means, is the process. It's a legal process, and so the documents that I'm going to be referring to are documents that are in the court's records, okay? Now, as you know, the Port of Galveston was a major point of entry at the turn of the century, specifically before the 1900 storm. And so we had quite a number of individuals coming in through the port, but I will talk to you a little bit about why the port is not the only factor, okay, in this whole element, and whether if you were looking for the records of your family that came over and they didn't come in through the Port of Galveston, we may still have those records for you. And again, the port is not the primary focus, so just try not to focus too much on which port your folks came in through. So the most common documents that we will find, and I'll talk about each one of them, is the Declaration of Intention, the petition for naturalization or petition for citizenship, and a certificate of arrival. We're going to talk about all three of those. The Declaration of Intention was executed by the immigrant under oath. It was the immigrant's formal statement that they arrived in this country, they arrived legally, and they intended to permanently remain in this country, okay? It was basically just exactly as it is entitled, a declaration of their intention to remain here. Now, They also had to say that they were renouncing their allegiance to any prince or potentate or state government, any sort of government from whence they came. They had to renounce their allegiance to that. And then also, if they were a member of the nobility, they had to renounce all of the title that and their noble rank. They had to renounce all of that if they intended to remain here in the United States. So there was a lot that they had to go through just to get to the point of declaring their intention, which was just the first step. And so the declarations of intention, goodness, they are chock full of details, guys. I speak to a lot of genealogical groups, and they love these immigration records because they contain information, not just the individual's name, but their date of birth, physical description, occupation, where they were born, where they immigrated from, the vessel that they came over on. So even down to visible physical marks, like a scar or perhaps even a tattoo. Very, very interesting information. So if you are doing some research and you find that one of these documents has been executed by one of your family members, you will find out more information than you ever hoped to. And again, they would also have the country that they came from. If it was a woman, typically the women were not traveling alone. Typically they were traveling with family members, specifically male family members. And so you would see if the woman was traveling alone, it would provide information about her. But if she was traveling with a husband, it would also list the declaration of the husband would list the wife and all of the children, okay? And so the next document that was filed with the court is the petition for naturalization or the petition for citizenship. So this document, and we're going to talk a little bit about the time frame. When were these documents filed? How long did they have to be in the country in order to get them filed? Okay. But let's just talk a little bit more about the documents. It was the formal legal request of the immigrant to be made a citizen. Okay. So again, the declaration of intention was their declaration. It was just that. I have an intent to remain here and to become a citizen. The petition for citizenship was exactly that, a legal request to be made a citizen. They also contain fascinating details regarding the immigrant, and they reflect not only where the person was born, but they do talk a little bit about the leader of the country, like they will list who the prince or potentate was of that country. So whether you are looking at facts about the immigrant themselves or facts that surrounded the time period of in the country from which they came, either way, these documents are just chock full of terrific information and historical information. Now, I do enjoy reading this. So the petition for naturalization always included an oath, and the individual had to swear to this oath. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to read a little bit of it. I am not a disbeliever or in or opposed to organized government, or a member or affiliated with any organization or body of persons teaching disbelief in or opposed to organized government. Now, basically what that's saying is they're not an anarchist. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because there were laws that were specifically passed to forbid anarchists from being made citizens. I am not a polygamist. That was another law. You think I'm just making stuff up here. I promise I'm not. They had to swear they were not a polygamist. I'm not a polygamist, nor a believer in the practice of polygamy. I'm attached to the principles of the Constitution of the United States and well disposed to the good order and happiness of the United States. Now, that's what I love. They are wanting and disposed to the happiness of the United States. That's just terrific. And so it goes on to say that they renounce completely and forever all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, at which point then they would list the name of the leader of the country from whence they came. So it was a very serious document, right? They had to take this oath. They had to swear this before a clerk. So they sure better be certain that this is what they intend and want to do. So let's just talk a little bit about that third document that I mentioned, the Certificate of Arrival. So this was issued by the U.S. State Department, originally the Department of Labor, and it included the name of the individual that was entering the country, the date that the individual came, the port of entry, the vessel that the person came in on, okay? So these were also very chocked full of information about the individual. Now, what I again want to mention about the port is the Certificate of Arrival does again list the port of entry. And the documents that we have in our possession contain references to these ports. This is the variation. And so that you see that it's not just about the port of Galveston, guys, okay? So the ports of New York, New Orleans, Mobile, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Norfolk, Boston, Charleston, Tampa, Key West, Baton Rouge, Hoboken, Seattle, Savannah, San Francisco, and Pensacola. So again, if you are doing a little research or wanting to do a little research and your people came in from Hoboken, their records may still be found. If they settled in the Galveston County area, we may have some records for you to review, okay? The process. The declaration was filed first after the person had been in the United States for at least 2 years. Now, that's a pretty long time, okay? But they had to be in the States for at least a period of 2 years. Now, there are a few exceptions, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but it was filed by the head of household, as you can imagine, which was 9 times out of 10 the man, and only the woman if the woman was traveling or in the country, again, by herself without her family. Now, the immigrant would then file the the petition for certification and naturalization and citizenship after 3 more years. All right. So it was 2 years before they filed the declaration, 3 more years before they could file the petition. So here we have 5 years. That's a long time. And again, there are a couple of exceptions to this, but for the most part, that's what it was. Now, it was possible for the process to start in one court and then end in another. And sometimes this could add to some confusion. So for example, let's say an individual was in Harris County and filed a declaration of intention, and then they came down to Galveston County. Well, first of all, some people were confused and thought that the declaration of intention itself, because that was the initiation of a legal process, they think that that alone was enough to make them citizens. Well, it wasn't. And then they would try to file the second part, the petition for citizenship, in another court. So sometimes there was a little bit of confusion because you can imagine there weren't the record keeping and especially the communication between multiple counties just wasn't there. So the immigrants had quite a journey and they had to truly be on top of their game and be able to navigate a very difficult process in order to achieve their ultimate goal, which of course was citizenship. Now, with the petitions, the court would either grant or deny the petitions, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about why they might be denied. Few interesting facts. The Naturalization Act of 1802 allowed, as I mentioned, any court of record to naturalize a citizen. That is federal, state, county, even municipal. Again, that's why we have some of these records, okay, guys? Also, as you can imagine, that led to an alarming lack of uniformity. Imagine every municipality. So in 1906, there was a Naturalization Act that was passed, and that standardized the rules and the forms, right? So these documents could still be filed in any court of local jurisdiction, but at least with this act, all of the forms and the practices and procedures were a little more streamlined and a little more uniform. And I think that that helped a great deal. A couple of other interesting facts that I think you'll enjoy. The Immigration Act of 1891 excluded a few individuals. Now, remember I told you there were some times where the petition wasn't going to be granted, right? Well, let's talk a little bit about that. In 1891, with the Immigration Act, lunatics were excluded. How did they determine that? I don't know. How do we determine it nowadays? I don't know. Also, those with, and I quote, loathsome diseases. Are you gonna say it? Are you gonna talk about it? I don't think so. And those who had committed crimes of moral turpitude are not eligible for citizenship. Again, guys, this is totally the honor system. We're talking about them coming over from another country. There is no way that the court would have access to any such records. So you're swearing under oath, and either you take that oath seriously or you do not. But there were certain factors that could keep you from being a citizen. Now, this act also excluded those who practiced polygamy. Now, let's talk about that just a little bit. I get a little bit of a kick out of it because in each one of these documents and each oath that I see, they have to swear that they're not a polygamist. And I'm like, I'm not a polygamist. I don't have any opinion or position on it. But I just thought it was so interesting. Well, get this. This Immigration Act was 1891. And immigration, of course, was a very important topic, but polygamy was equated to slavery at this point in time. And it wasn't just about the Mormons in the Western territories. It was also about the Chinese immigrants in California. And if you have polygamy equated to slavery, literally just a few years after the Civil War, no. We were a nation that said no. Brother had just fought against brother. No. Nothing that remotely looks like the practice of slavery is going to be tolerated in this country. Therefore, polygamy was excluded. Isn't that interesting? To me, it was fascinating. Okay, let's talk about the Immigration Act of 1903. This was known as the Anarchist Exclusion Act. Now, again, we'll talk about this. Now, this exclusion of anarchists became important after the assassination of President McKinley. The person who assassinated him identified himself as an anarchist, openly identified himself as an anarchist. And what I think is interesting is that if you are an anarchist, are you gonna admit it? I don't think so. I could be wrong. I personally am not an anarchist. I don't know any that I'm aware of, but I just think this is interesting too. Again, it is a very serious topic, but I just wonder how many individuals who truly had those tendencies were going to express that during some legal process? I bet they wouldn't. Now, also during this act, just so you know, individuals were excluded if they suffered from epilepsy, if they were beggars, or if they were importers of prostitutes. So you could be a prostitute, but please do not import them. Because if you did, you were not going to become a member and a citizen of the United States. These things are fascinating. Now, a few other interesting facts. Derivative citizenship. Guys, you know how we've talked a little bit about the fact that many times women were traveling with family members and their head of household, which would be their husband. So children and women and children were typically made citizens derivatively. So by and through the efforts of their husband or the head of household. Okay. So that's one thing that I find very interesting. Another thing that I just think is unbelievable is that a woman could gain citizenship through her husband, right? We've just talked about that. But she could also lose her citizenship. She could lose her citizenship if she married a non-citizen. So even if she herself was born and raised in America, never even left America, but if she married a non-citizen, she would lose her citizenship. I mean, again, it's almost impossible for us to consider during these days and times that we would allow that to happen. Now, some individuals were granted citizenship, not based on the time that they were here. Remember, we talked a little bit about that there would be some exceptions to that 2-year plus 3-year thing. So some, it was because of their service to the country, like veterans, people who have fought for the protection of America, then they could become citizens. Now, in these instances, the individual would have to submit an affidavit that verified their service, okay? But it would be interesting to me, and it makes sense to me, that one of the things that we would try to do, even in those times, to honor the service of our veterans, would be to prevent them from having to go through any additional red tape and to endure any additional time when they had already endured so much. So that's another thing to consider with regard to veterans. Now, immigration was originally seen as an economic issue. Now, this is interesting for us because after World War II, it became clearly an issue of national security, right? Which makes sense. But now the way we think about it, we automatically think about it as a matter of security. We would never really think about it as an economic issue, but that is exactly how it was seen initially, is a matter of economics, not a matter of national security. Another thing I want to point out to you, because I will show a few sample documents, is that the history that's contained in these documents, not just about the individuals, but about the sovereigns and the princes and the kings that served, was also the vessel that the person came over on. So we have records that reflect the individuals coming over on the Lusitania. And that's something you don't have to be a buff of maritime and maritime history to be familiar with the Lusitania. Because the Titanic went down on her maiden voyage, right? The Lusitania did not. She made hundreds of voyages before she was shot down in May of 1915 while she was sunk, forgive me, by a German U-boat, killing almost 1,200 passengers and crew. But what history? To see a certificate of arrival or to see a declaration of intention that reflects that this individual came over on the Lusitania. Here's a couple of samples, and I know that you can't read all the documents, but I just wanted to point out a couple of things to you that This is a declaration of intention. This is an older one because you can see a lot of it is in hand, written in hand, right? You can see that it's not typed. And this individual was born in Spain, but came over from Cuba. So, another note as you're doing some research that it could really throw you a little bit. You're following a path and you know that your family member was born in Spain. Okay, so you're following that trail, but they didn't immigrate from Spain. Somehow their path led them to Cuba. They immigrated from Cuba. You're not searching anything about Cuba, you're searching about Spain. So, again, bear in mind that these documents can reveal certain facts that you didn't even know you needed. You didn't even know you were looking for. Okay. And then about midway down, you'll see that there's a little section that indicates Gustav V, the king of, is it Sweden? I can hardly see it from there, or the king of Spain. So that is where the individual would put in there or give the clerk the information about who the sovereign was from the place that they came from. And so here's a little bit closer. You can see that he was born in Cuba, born in Spain, came over from Cuba, and the potentate was Alfonso the 13th, the king of Spain. It says that he came in from the port of Galveston. And again, this is an example. It says that he was fair. He was 5'6". He was 26 years of age. He had a scar on the left of his face. Again, you would never even hope to have that much detailed information about your family member, but you could find it if you can find a document that they are associated with. Here's another one. Again, it's a declaration of a declaration of independence. I love it. A declaration of intention. And so it has some information about where the person came from, what vessel they were on, etc. This is another one. You can tell that this one is a little bit older and, a little bit more recent. And let me go back to the other one real quick because I know that you can't see the details. But in the section that asks to renounce the prince or potentate, it says Wilhelm II, the emperor of Germany. So this individual came over in about like 1915 to 1919, okay? And that was who was in charge, and that's fine. He's renouncing his allegiance to that. He was born in Germany. The next one, which is from like the 1920s, also a German immigrant, but look, I don't know if you can see it. He is announcing allegiance to the German Reich. So you go from emperors to the Reich. We know what's coming. But the reflection in these documents of the history of the world is just fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And it's just the difference of a few years. And this one is an example of a petition for citizenship. And again, you can see that from the early 1900s until about the 1920s, then we started to use typewriters, right? So we had the same forms, but it wasn't all handwritten. This is a lovely lady. I'm going to go in on a close-up of her. She is from Italy. Her name was Grazia Citra. And I love to focus on her because it's so unusual to see a young woman coming over by themselves. And she did come over by herself. And so this was her declaration of intention. And let's go a little closer. Once she got here, she went from Grazia Citra to Ida Grace. Because what's more American and apple pie than Ida Grace Citra? I love it. Notice that her photo is so beautiful and it's just intact. And notice too that she had to sign on the photo. She had to sign on the photo. That's really for the sake of the court and the clerks, because if that photo came detached from that piece of paper, how could they possibly know? But there they had them sign the photo so they could easily reconnect the photo to the document. And this is the oath that she had to take, swearing allegiance to the United States. And it won't surprise you to know that this sweet little lady was not a polygamist or an anarchist. Okay? Just so you know, in case you were concerned. Now, here's another one. Again, I know the detail is hard to see, but I want to show you because it gives me, oh, this is again, Ida Grace. And this is her oath. And you can see that she is renouncing Victor Emmanuel III, the King of Italy. I don't know about y'all. I'm a history buff. I've never heard of Victor Emmanuel. I don't know that much about the Italian leaders unless they were associated with one of the world wars, right? I mean, when do we know that sort of thing? So I thought this was pretty fascinating. And it shows the clerk, the deputy clerk. And one thing I wanted to show you, look toward the bottom. And it shows that it gives a line for the petition to be granted and a line for it to be denied. This was granted. This was granted. And then apparently they would issue some sort of a certificate and give it to the immigrant to show. Now, we don't have copies of those, and boy, do I wish we did. But they would give something from the court to the immigrant to confirm that the immigration process was complete and that the petition for immigration had been approved instead of rejected. Okay? So if you come upon something that looks a little bit like a court document when you're going through the records of or what you have researched, it could very well be one of these certificates that has been issued. Here's another one that gives us just a little closer look. And in this one, let me see if I go a little bit closer to it. Okay, this is a copy of the certificate of arrival. Now, this is an older one, and you can see that it makes reference to the Department of Labor. It talks about the individual that came, what port they came into, the date, and the vessel. And this next example, we were at that point then, it's later in time, the Department of Justice. Okay, so we can see the transition from this being a matter of economics to this being a matter of national security. And what I'd like to point out on this one, look at the name of the vessel, the Lusitania. So this individual came over on the Lusitania. And these were issued, again, by the Department of Labor and then by the Department of Justice to the immigrant, and they would provide this to the court. This was information that they had to provide to the court. So this was not a document that the court created. It was a document that the federal government would create, more associated with the port in which the individual came, but it would be filed with the court records. This is another one, but I want to show you the detail because it tickles me. So technically, this person came over from Great Britain, and they have to renounce their prince or potentate. Well, let's tell you his full name. George V, by the grace of God of Great Britain, Ireland, and the British Dominion beyond the seas, defender of the faith, Emperor of India. Whew. That's a mouthful. That's a mouthful, guys. And that just tickled me that not just George V, I think we could figure it out. No. Defender of the faith, Emperor of India. Oh my goodness, that's a big one. So let's talk a little bit about access to these records, okay? So the district clerk's office has digitized all of their records. They have digitized all of these records. And again, this is the Galveston County District Clerk's Office. This is not the county clerk's office. Let me just make a comment. So the county clerk's office, they have records as well. We both have civil and criminal court records, but the county clerk's office, I don't know, I believe they may have some immigration records. I don't know if they are digitized. So I am talking specifically about the district clerk's office. And if you go on our webpage, and I'll go through this just a little bit with you, you will see that there's a section that refers to immigration, and that is something that you can certainly do. Now, they could also be reviewed actually at our office. So our offices are located at the Galveston County Justice Center, which is on 59th Street in Galveston, right behind the post office right there on Broadway. And specifically, our customer service department on the fourth floor is the office that would help you if you wanted to come in and actually take a look at some of these records. And we're open from 8 to 5. Someone is there during the lunch hour. What I would say is, guys, at the very end, I'll put my contact information up. And so you'll be able to see that what my contact information is, maybe take a picture of it, because if you would like to come down and take a look at some of these records, maybe you could reach out to me first, and I can help you get in contact with our customer service department and our customer service supervisor. So you can search the information online by entering any keyword. Now, this could be a little, it's not quite as easy as you would think, because, for example, my mother's family came from Italy. Her father was the first of their children to be born in the United States. And the name is Massa, Massa. So I was trying to search Massa. Well, it came up Massa, Massachusetts. Okay. Yeah, no, I'm not interested in Massachusetts. So bear in mind that it's not a perfect search engine, but my point is, if you don't know, if you don't have a whole lot of information about the date that they came or what port they came into, but you have a last name, or you happen to know the vessel that they came in on, then you can search by that. So for example, I did a search under the Lusitania in order to pull a few records and a few of the certificates of arrival from the Lusitania. So it's not the best search engine, but it is an effective one for you to at least get started on your research. Now, if you, and again, a member of our staff can assist you, what you'll find is, and I think I have an example of it, is that you do have to put in your name and your email address. You do not have to attach any credit card. It's nothing like that, but it's just kind of allowing you to create a profile, if you will. And then you're able to start the search and see if any documents pop up when you put in the initial information that you have. So this is just a shot of our home page. Can you see, if you're looking at the page to the far left and on the bottom, it says Immigration Records. Okay, so again, if you can just make your way to the home page of the district clerk's office, you will see where the immigration records reside. And then you can just click on that and follow the instructions. This is what I was telling you about, our online records portal that is specifically for immigration, and it does ask you to just put in a little bit of information. Again, name and email, I believe, is what it is. And one interesting thing is that as you are doing your research, it will and you leave the research and then you come back, it will keep track of when you were there, and I think it will allow you to kind of pick up where you left off. I'm not really too sure how long it will maintain that, but I did notice when I had left it and then came back, it was keeping, it kept note of that the last time that I had been there to do a little bit of research. Now, guys, this is the primary search screen. And I know it's a little hard to see, but it gives you boxes in which you can put a first name, a last name, a country, a vessel, etc. And certainly if you knew a volume or a page number, listen, very few of us are going to know that much information, but this at least enables you to begin the search, okay? Just to begin the search. Now, if you find something, you find a document, before you have to take that next step to pay for a copy, right? Which I want to say is like $1 a page or something. Before you have to take the step to make a commitment to actually purchase the document, you will see a copy of the document with a watermark on it. Now, why is this important? Well, because it allows you to see, is that what you were looking for? Like in my situation, was it for John Massa or Joseph Massa, or was it about Massachusetts? So I could determine before I made any further commitment whether or not I wanted to move forward with this document. So it will bring this up for you so you can see it. And I do want to point out, guys, that with this petition and these petitions for citizenship, they also needed to have witnesses. And you would find even that is an interesting bit of information, that these individuals that were witnesses were good friends or people that they were in the same community and in the same neighborhoods. And you could see that reflected when the witnesses were signing and putting their addresses in. Now, we also have, pardon me, we also have some indexes, and these were created after the fact. To me, it looks like they were created in maybe the 50s or something. But the good thing is it in alphabetical order lists the names of the individuals for whom we have immigration information. So let's say you punch in the name of the individual in question, and it pops up one of these. Well, what this is able to show you is, do we have information? What is the volume and the page number? Do we have a declaration? Do we have a petition for citizenship? It'll give you the year, etc. So even these indexes can be a pretty rich source of information. So if one of these pops up, yes, it is not an individual document, but if you do find the name of the individual in question, it gives you some great information to start with and to help you find the documents associated with your family member. So guys, here is my contact information. I know the email is a little hard to see because it's a little darker. I've put my direct line, my email address, and you are welcomed to reach out to me if you have any questions or if reviewing these documents is something that you think that you would like to do. I also do speak to different genealogical groups, and I'm happy, or historic groups that enjoy history. So if you or even civic groups, anything of that nature, typically within Galveston County, although I've gone outside of the county just a little bit. But if you are aware of any groups that might be interested in something like this, the immigration records, or I have another presentation that goes through history, different time periods of history, and reflecting and seeing how court records reflect the history of that. So I don't know if you all have any questions. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
There was a certificate of arrival that she had pulled up for, showed somebody on
Mhm.
It said that they came over in 1907. Lusitania sunk in 1915.
Right.
But that certificate wasn't issued until
41.
So they didn't file. They're saying they didn't file for that certificate of arrival until 1941.
Yes. So there is a question about a certificate of arrival reflecting a person coming in 1907 and not seeking the certificate until 1941. So yes, sir, it indicates to me that for whatever reason, there was quite a delay. I don't understand why there would be, unless perhaps the individual was a child when they arrived and they sought the certificate when they were old enough, but they should have received, again, through derivative citizenship, they should have received citizenship through the head of household. So to me, it's a little mind boggling that they would allow that much time to pass. But for whatever reason, in that instance, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I just wondering why you would file a certificate of arrival as opposed to a petition for naturalization or for...
Sure. So the certificate of arrival was just a supporting document. Okay. So it was not in itself a document whereby they were requesting that a legal process be started. It was simply something that was filed in support of the petition or the declaration of intention. Okay. So it was something that was required by the court, but it was not in and of itself either the declaration or the petition for citizenship. Okay. Think of it as some sort of an exhibit or an attachment that they needed to file, just like when we talked a little bit about the veterans and how they needed to show that, yes, they could bypass the 2 years and the 3 years, but they needed to show that they had served and they needed to get an affidavit. It is something along those lines. Yes, sir. A supporting document. Exactly. Any other questions? No? Well, guys, I appreciate so very much your time and your attention. It's been my pleasure. It's my second year to speak at this festival, and I look forward to next year. So thank you again for your attention. Appreciate it.